Greetings, boys and babes. It's the Magic Hour, a place where we navigate through life's peaks and valleys with all the vulnerability and shamelessness we can muster. With the help of world-class guests from all walks of life, we uncover new truths and valuable tools for manifesting our highest potential. I'm your host, Mercedes Terrell, along with my partner in shine, Jade Bryce.
Hey, you guys. Mercedes and I love a good comic, and you know we love us some jiu-jitsu, and today's guest is a high level in both.
Yes, his new album, 25% Capacity, had me literally in tears from laughter, and I believe it hit the charts at number 5 within only a few hours. So can't wait to share his humor and wisdom with our listeners today. I know you guys are going to soak this stuff up.
Yes, me too. Our guest today is a comedian, podcast host, writer, and performer who has been on the Joe Rogan Experience, Showtime's The Green Room, and Conan. He is an incredibly original voice as a leftist comedian whose material is informed by progressive politics and the chaos of contemporary culture. With his beat, poetry-inspired performance style and his socio-political activism, he has spearheaded a subculture of comedy fans and socially aware youth and has primed himself to become the voice of a generation. He's also a Marcelo Garcia trained Jiu Jitsu brown belt and Muay Thai fighter. Please help me welcome Jamie Kilstein to the Magic Hour.
Hi, you guys are so nice. Who the fuck wrote that? I've never heard that like leftist thing. People
Is it
are
true?
I mean, I don't know. Kind of. I'm certainly not the voice of a generation, or else I apologize to the entire generation. Though hearing nice things said about me, like when Mercedes said she even listened to the album, I was like, holy shit, what? Like, I'm so used to the bad voices, and every time someone has me on their podcast, I'm like, this is certainly a mistake, and we'll clear this up midway through when they realize it's like a different Jamie. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm lefty in the sense that, like, I don't know. I didn't dress nicely for this. I'm wearing a fucking tank top. I don't be mean to gay people or women or black people, right? Like, but I'm honestly, I'm at the point right now with politics where the fact that even COVID, like a global pandemic, somehow was made into a political issue where you're either like, you know, you're pro-mask and that means you hate jobs, or
It's a political statement, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like when everybody on all the sides should be coming together, I think that shows how divided we've become. And I think that when you get off social media and you get off the internet and you talk to like normal human beings, you realize that most of us want the same thing. We want a nice life. We want love and support for our families, like all this stuff. And so I know I don't classify myself as like, I have friends all over the place now on the spectrum, you know. I feel like the racist saying I have black friends being like, I have conservative friends, but like.
Well, I know there's that saying in government, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I definitely feel like we are all being pinned against each other. So yeah, I think.
I mean, it happened under Katrina. It happened after 9/11. My friend, I interviewed her a couple times, Naomi Klein. She wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, and it was all about that. It was every time there was a natural disaster, every time. By the way, guys, I'm funny, but anyway, back to geopolitics. And the government and these corporations will kind of rush in and be like, how can we do something cartoonishly evil off of this tragedy? And I just wish that like good people, because there are assholes on all sides, there are great people on all sides, and I feel like when the great people find each other, real magic can happen. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since I left LA. I was like, I just want, in everything, in jiu-jitsu and comedy, I'm like, I just want to find cool people and like make art and be nice and try to help people. And it sounds so trite, but it's honestly, I feel like what quarantine did for me is show me that the key to life isn't all of those cliches, right? About loving yourself, about, you know, treating others with kindness. It's all of that. And there's so much noise, especially in LA, that I'm just kind of done with that.
California and Texas, I know you just moved to Austin.
I moved Friday.
Yeah, wow. They are very different worlds right now, for sure. completely opposite. I have friends that are visiting from California right now as well, and they're like, everything feels really normal here. And I have friends visiting from New York, and they're like, they came here specifically because they needed to kind of feel a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah.
And then about your tank top, my kids go to Jiu Jitsu at 10th Planet. So
No, yeah, so I'm friends with Gabe. I'm going to be training there.
okay, awesome. Yeah, my kids go there. They're big into Warrior Kid and
hilarious
and all that.
There is definitely gonna be a point where I fight your children. How great is
well,
that?
no, I don't know about that.
How great is that?
They'll wrestle you.
I used to teach.
I think you're in different weight classes.
No. Guys, like I said, I don't like hearing compliments about me. So the way I stay confident is I fight children. I used to run the kids program at Henzo's LA. I used to teach it and stuff. So like,
well, maybe you'd be a great instructor for them. I bet. Maybe
I know.
Maybe you
can. I'm trying to say you shot it down. Yeah, no. I felt that way when I went to LA. And look, I'm careful, right? I'm pretty secure with me and COVID, but like I had a UFC fighter who I was doing a thing with literally cough on me and go and make a joke and goes, don't worry, it's not COVID. And then the next day I got a text message like after like a weird one night stand that was like, you may want to sit down for this. And they had COVID. Fucking somehow I did not get it. So no one has the answers. I have no idea. And then I also know people who have stayed home, completely isolated themselves, got it, whether it was a handyman. I love what Kingsbury said on one of his podcasts. I don't know if he feels this way anymore. But a while ago when he was like, man, if a mask is going to make like old vulnerable people like feel safer around me, like whatever. I want to do things that will help people. With that said, and to your point, Jade, when I was in LA, and I lived in LA for a while, so when I went back to LA to do press, the tenseness and from everybody was so toxic that I was like, I can't be here. Like I was supposed to do another tour back, and it's rough. It's weird. And I know everyone, they're doing the right things. They're masked up more. They're this, they're that, but they are all so tense and so you can just feel the negativity like radiating off people that I'm like, this isn't healthy either. This is not the answer,
Yeah.
With that said, I should let you know I'm in Orange County, California right now.
Oh my God.
But right before you actually entered the Zoom, I got an emergency alert about COVID, stay inside,
right,
for your area, blah, blah, blah. And it is, I don't know, I noticed throughout my friends group, it's just hit or miss. Like some are really taking it to another level of seriousness, and they have reason, they have good reasons for it. But some are just, they haven't really participated in it at all since the get-go.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I got to the point where, and we don't have to talk about COVID this whole time, but this probably will segue into something else, where I just deal with such depression that when, like I said this on the album, and this was not a joke, this was true, which was like, my life was bad before COVID happened. Like literally in a week, it was like a country song, man. Like my cat died, my girlfriend left the next day. It was ridiculous. And then I was like, well, all right, I can deal with this. And then COVID happened, and I was like, what the fuck, man? What's happening? Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where, and I live around a lot of old people. I'm like the cool tattooed friend of like a lot of widows with cute dogs. And I just got to a point where I was like, if I don't get outside, I was getting my groceries delivery, I was doing all the thing, and it just completely wreaked havoc on like my mental health. And then once I started again being safe, but like going outside and seeing some people and finding places where I could train safely, I was like, right, this is so incredibly important to do that.
Yeah. We're just kind of waiting for it to like land, but I don't know if it's ever we're just gonna have to start evolving in here somewhere.
There's so many conspiracy theorists. And speaking of Kyle, you brought up Kyle. He sure he still believes in that and doing what's best for those around him. But I'm so fortunate to have him as a best friend, because you said, like, you don't know if he still believes this, because literally every week he has new beliefs, because that is how much he grows. So
you know what? So I'm so glad you fucking said that. I've never heard anyone say that. There is this thing, especially in like political social media, where like if you change your mind on something, you're automatically
you're a
deemed
contradiction.
like, oh yeah, no, they go even worse because they're soulless, where they'll call you a grifter.
Totally.
And it's like, I thought that changing your mind was evolution.
It's also the hardest thing to do, come up against a cognitive dissonance.
So hard to do. And the thing that about Kyle, and clearly about you guys too, is like, dude, I want to hear those other opinions. And then I want to figure out what the best point of view is. I want to do it with science. I want to do it with jiu-jitsu. I want to do it with my comedy. That is the way you get good at things. It's the Bruce Lee adage, but not to martial arts, which is the take what is useful, disregard what is useless, add what's your own. And that came from him kind of being one of the first MMA guys by taking from all these traditional martial arts and then more Western martial arts and combining it into his own style. You should be able to also do that with intellectual thought, right? With politics, with the fact that if you are not in one complete category, where you're either all progressive or you're all conservative, that you're like excluded from the group is insane. And yeah, that's one of the reasons I love Kyle and really all of the people I'm starting to meet tangentially, you know, you guys or just in the Austin scene. I'm so excited to get down there and just not be in an echo chamber and learn new stuff every day and maybe change someone else's mind on something and maybe change my mind. It should be something we fucking strive for. And the fact that it's criticized shows you, it's like, what are you afraid of? If you're criticizing me for changing your mind, changing my mind, then clearly you are not confident in your beliefs. It's like when you're fighting with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and the second you realize you're wrong, suddenly you like double down and start yelling, and you have to be like, I'm sorry, I don't yell. This is you're correct. You know, you have to like pull your, where people are just freaking out. And you know, I think that having open conversations about all this is the most essential thing we should be doing.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's funny, a guy we had on the show during the BLM, you know, the big BLM moment, we'll call, but we want to call it a movement, right? Or keep calling it a movement. His name's Makad Brooks, and we've been following him for a long time now.
I heard him on Aubrey's. I think he was great.
He's great. And he had so much amazing and enlightening stuff to add to the conversation when it came to BLM and everything that was happening and that is still going on now. And this morning I was looking at a post of his where he says, for all that time, and on our show, he's about, you know, defund the police, hashtag defund the police. And we brought that up. We talked about it. We went into the depths of what that really means or what it should mean and all those things. And he was really behind it because he knew there needed to be a shaking at that time where defund the police will make people go, wait, are we sure we want to defund the police? Then what, is it going to be just chaos? You know, you have to go all the way into that rabbit hole. Right. And the reality is defund the police probably isn't the full picture, right? It's just a thing to get you to start looking at it.
To listen,
yeah. So today he says, you know, okay, I'm really looking at defund the police and the messaging behind it. I need to change what the statement is because for me, it no longer works because the messaging is pushing away the people that I'm trying to build a bridge toward.
Yeah.
You know? And he's like, reimagine the police. Let's reword this.
Beautiful. Because it was so easy to drive people away. By the way, here, I'll trash Trump and then I'll go on to agree with what you guys are saying, which is my favorite thing about the defund the police is all the Trump political ads that were like showing like, this is the world Joe Biden wants. And it was like the streets on fire and stuff like that. But it was footage from the Trump administration. It was footage from your administration. And you're like, this is what this guy wants. It's like, hey, dude, it's happening right now. It's you. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think that the thing that upsets me, so I was training with this dude who's a cop. And I asked him questions after I beat him up to assert dominance, where I was like, hey, man, can I ask you about like the George Floyd stuff? And me and him, and he's a conservative guy. Me and him agreed on literally everything. Literally everything. And those voices you don't hear. And I also think what happens is people get defensive, right? People get defensive about their side, where if you're a conservative and everyone is calling you a racist and everyone's calling you a Nazi and you're not a racist and you're not a Nazi, or if you're a liberal and everyone's calling you some like Marxist anarchist kid and you're like, I'm too high to make a Molotov cocktail. What are you talking about? I think that what happens is when the other side does something right or when your side does something wrong, you are hesitant to criticize it because you're just putting up these walls, right? And so if anyone should be the angriest about what happened to George Floyd, it's cops. If someone was running around murdering people with rear naked chokes and was like, I love Jiu Jitsu, I'm going to be like, ah, shit, well, we got to stop this guy, you know, as a Jiu Jitsu guy and someone who cares about Jiu Jitsu. You know, cops are putting their lives on the line. Of course, they want to get rid of bad cops, but we don't have this conversation. We have like these insane, like union cop guys screaming at, you know, and I think what I love about your friend is being open to conversations. You know, I had Tim Kennedy on my podcast afterwards, and I was like, I want to talk to Black people about what's going on, but I also want to talk to someone who's been in law enforcement and martial arts or military with him. And he knows so many things. And, you know, some of the solution ideas, some of the solutions he had were sounding progressive. You know, and a lot of the other stuff Tim talks about sounds very conservative, but because we were having a conversation where we weren't yelling at each other,
Right.
I probably agreed with some of his more conservative leaning points and he agreed with a lot of my more left leaning points. And it's like, oh man, it was pretty easy to do. But then you go back on social media and you start being blasted and then you just turn into a maniac again.
Yeah. And it all, you know, the cliches that you said that you realized are all true through COVID. The one that is the truest maybe of all is that communication is everything.
Oh
and it
God,
comes down to how we talk to each other in order to be a bridge to whatever we're trying to, the end goal that we all want, which is exactly the same. And so to the point about Makad is just, you know, I praise him for being a changer, which
That's
is
awesome.
the opposite of what most would think, right? We want to be like this binary black or white thing, but the reality is that we're all in the gray and we wouldn't want it any other way if we really looked at it closely. And so that brings me to the idea of what makes, or the question maybe of what makes a good influencer. And in that moment where Makad was showing us, you know, how he was going to go again, you know, basically come up against his own cognitive dissonance and say, hey, I was wrong, but I want to show you like a different way we can do this. And I'm going to lead this, you know, I'm going to pioneer this route. Well, when it comes to you, I know that, you know, you have done such an amazing job of somehow blending this world of being a comic and being in the jiu-jitsu space and speaking your voice as like, I'm going to call you a philosopher or even maybe a mystic or something like that. I don't know what you would label yourself, but that's kind of what I get.
I label myself a piece of shit. So like you label me that stuff. That stuff's amazing. That is what I will quote you now when I label myself.
Yes, a philosopher and a mystic. So if you can maybe sum up for us, because we're doing this interview maybe a little bit backwards, we usually like to get just a gist of where you came from and what brought you to
before
today.
I start ranting incoherently about politics.
You're here to make us laugh.
It's only
I was trying to like rewind and I was like, Jamie, how the fuck did that happen? Is what I was literally just thinking. I was like, all I want to do is not talk about politics anymore. And 5 minutes into every, I'm like, George Floyd was murdered. And I was just like, God damn it.
Did it again.
All I want, I told Jade before this podcast, Jade and I were texting and I was just like, all I want, I was like, I don't need any more like comedy fans calling me cucks. I don't need any more of this. I just want, like I said, with the reason I was so excited, one of the reasons I was so excited to do this podcast is when I interviewed, because I interview fighters, I interview professional wrestlers, I interview comedians, but when I interviewed Trevor Hall, my Instagram for like 2 weeks was just filled with these beautifully wonderful, kind men and women who all do yoga, and they were sending me pictures of like Ram Dass and stuff, and I was like, this is the life I want. Just get me more of those fans. I don't need any more fucking fighters. I don't need any more mean comics saying terrible things. I just want like very sweet spiritual people. And then I spent 10 minutes screaming about politics, and I'm like, well, Jamie, this is why you have the life you have.
Well, I think that Jade and I would consider ourselves the bridge for people on their journey, not necessarily, just so FYI, so
yeah,
the following that we have is not necessarily already in that mode. So you might be
this is how I feel.
Yeah, you might be directly speaking to the people that you already have been speaking to. You might get more of that, but also we hope that it's people also opening themselves to gray area, journeying into the gray. But so you are an influencer for sure in this space, and you're already influencing Jade and my life, and here you are influencing the lives of our listeners as well. So could you walk us toward how you came about deciding you're going to be a comic, and deciding you want to, invest a lot of time in learning the art of Jiu Jitsu, in the MMA space, all that? What makes Jamie?
This is great. So, comedy, we'll do comedy first, because comedy and jiu-jitsu, I actually do think there are a lot of parallels when it comes to getting high level, and a lot of it actually has to do with like meditation and flow and ego stuff. But for when I started, I've had a love-hate relationship with comedy always, up until now. The only person I told this was my manager, and I'll tell you guys and a lot of people listening to this, like, there's a great chance this is my last album, and I'm cool with that. There was a phase when I was doing much better than I'm doing right now that I would jokingly on my podcast advertise every show as my last show. It would just be, come see my last show this week, or my last show like next week. Like, that was the bit. And the reason, I will get to the history, but the reason, and what might be interesting to your listeners, is, with comedy, I can be creative, and I got good at it. But there's a lot of really toxic stuff around comedy. You're sort of glorified for being a degenerate, right? If I walked into the back of a comedy club with my Ram Dass book and little beads and was like, guys, how do we better ourselves? I would be like, get out. And a lot of it I have to take personal responsibility for, right? Because like, well, I don't have to drink, and I don't have to eat shitty comedy club food, and I don't have to, try to hook up with someone after the show. But it was so ingrained in the culture, and I was so insecure that that's always what happened. And so when I did kind of throw myself fully into jiu-jitsu and MMA, suddenly I was healthy. Suddenly I was confident. Suddenly I had an idea what healthy masculinity looked like. All of these things. I'm meditating. I'm waking up early, but I'm not creating. So then I kind of got depressed on that end. So it's always been this battle for me. I mean, shit, I made a very dark video this morning on Instagram where I'm joking about like, here's how to be a comedian. And it's essentially like, be miserable. And I even talked about, the guy who would talk me out of quitting comedy weekly was fucking Robin Williams, and then he died. So even some of the most wonderful things and memories I have in comedy are still like tainted with this, dark whatever. And so going back to the beginning, I didn't really want to be a comic. I didn't think I was that funny. I loved comedy. And I wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to be a professional wrestler, were the two things I wanted to do. And professional wrestling, that's why I started martial arts when I was younger, because I was like, the little guys all do like martial arts. That's what makes them be able to compete with like those giant guys. So that's why I started martial arts. And I was in a band. I was in a jam band, which I'm sure many of your listeners have already figured out and profiled me. And we were great, I thought, for a little high school stoner jam band. And I remember we were juniors in high school, and I was like, all right, guys, we had our first like big gig. I was like, now we got to talk about like touring after school, and we got to talk about merch and all this stuff. And they were like, dude, we have to go to college. And I was like, what? that's crazy, but we know what we want to do. We want to do this. And they're like, yeah, but our parents, like, we got to go to college. And that's kind of always been a constant in my life, where I've been the person in the group that, like, we all start the crazy thing and then it just like gets whittled away. And then suddenly I'm by myself doing the crazy thing. And so I didn't sing. I just played guitar and drums. And I'm like, well, I can't be in a band by myself. And so I started kind of obsessing over stand-up, and I would listen to all these comics. I was really obsessed with like Bill Hicks and George Carlin, like the counterculture ones, because I can never do anything the easy way. And I just, I was like, well, I guess comedy, I can still perform. I still don't have to do a regular job. I was failing out of high school. I dropped out junior year, but I would have failed out. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll just do this, essentially, because how sad is this? I won't be let down. Like, nobody can quit. No one can leave me behind, right? That's so sad, and I've never phrased it that way. Again, guys, buy my hilarious comedy album. Anyway, so I'm constantly being abandoned, and I'm alone. So that's why I started comedy. And then it's just, I just threw myself into it, you know? I'm one of those personalities where I can't fake things I don't care about, which is why even when I was like buckle down and graduate, I literally, like, my brain, I'm just thinking about music or wrestling or comedy. And then, and I'll convince myself I'm stupid. I mean, I've been on the news with Nobel Prize winner, and I'm still will have this thing in my head where I'm like, you're dumb, you're a high school dropout, blah, blah, blah. And then, but when I want to do something, whether it's professional wrestling at 38, which is insane, whether it's doing music again, whether it's stand-up, I will go all in and be very, very, very good at like very niche, unmarketable, shady things. So yeah, so that's kind of the gist of the beginning of comedy.
I want to stop you there, just because I think it's fascinating that you have that. Essentially, the shadow side of you is playing with the light at the same time, where you're this overachiever. You know, you can be extremely motivated if the passion is peaked. You know, if you see it, you're after it, you're going to make it there. You don't even have to worry about yourself in that regard. If you have your back against the wall enough, you're going to make it through. You know what I mean? You're going to fight right through. Absolutely. And that doesn't live in everybody. That's definitely a gift. And of course, with every gift comes the shadow side. And what I heard you say right now was that you play the dark horse on purpose, because it allows you to escape being seen too clearly. Therefore, you'd have to show up. If you know what I'm saying? If someone saw your gift too brightly, you'd have to show up for it. And then you're nervous that if you show that you are that gift all the time, then you're going to have to be responsible for that.
That's such a cool way to put it. Yeah. My dad would say something like that much more clumsily and horrible. And so I would ignore it. Where, but the way you put it, I'm like, oh, maybe that's what he meant. Where he would always talk about, you know, you hear like fear of success, and that sounds like the dumbest thing ever. Because it's like, no, I want to be successful. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to be struggling. I just want to make things. But when you dig really deep into, you know, what you're saying, it's like, yeah, there's probably a lot of that too. And, you know, for me, the shadow side was also just a lack of confidence. A lack of confidence with girls, a lack of confidence with who I am, a lack of confidence. You know, even when I was doing well with comedy, I think one of the reasons Robin and I bonded so hard was because, you know, everyone loves him, but he's like a really quiet guy. He was actually a very political guy. He sponsored my podcast for a very long time when we didn't have sponsors. So if people actually knew, the show would have been called, you know, it would have been sponsored by fucking Robin Williams. And I actually put something out before he died, and it was dedicated to him because I wouldn't be anywhere without him. And then he died, and people, I haven't talked about this in so long, people assumed that I dedicated it to him like in memoriam, you know, but it's like, no, it just, I did that before he died, and then he died, and then it came out. And like, so where I was going with that was, I'm not even like doing comedy podcasts promoting this album. The reason I was so excited to do this one for real was just to have conversations like this, because I don't fit in to a bunch of comics sitting around the table finding different ways to call each other gay and like drinking. I'm like very bad at that. And like, these are the conversations I want to have. And then it's like, yeah, but buy my album. I'll be funny there. But like, I'm more interested in this, like not proving. It's not like, you know, like the alpha kind of whatever. And
well, you can be both.
Yeah, but this insecurity that I had around comics, around like all of that sort of fed in. That's why I assumed that sort of darker side would come out with comedy, where it's like, okay, well, if I'm drinking, if I'm doing this, if the bar is set at degenerate, then I never did anything terrible. But if the bar is set at like, you know, being a fuck up is cheered, you know, because you talk about it on stage and then everyone laughs because they can live through you and blah, blah, blah. It's cathartic. Then I'm like, this is great. This is perfect. And that's why, and you know, this album was really important for me because everything was sober. Everything was written during quarantine, where I've been really healthy and spiritual and meditating. And it kind of proved that this is why I'm fine with it being the last album. It kind of proved that I could do it. And I've never talked about the relationship stuff that I talked about on this album. I've never talked about sex. I was always just screaming about politics. And so I'm really proud that I did something like this. But it's still a struggle. I don't get excited about comedy. You tell me I'm going to do professional wrestling in front of 20 people, or I'm going to play rhythm guitar in like a cover band in like downtown Austin. I am infinitely more excited than about, or even like I was talking to my manager about doing some kind of comedy stuff with even like the spiritual community, or like that would be great, you know, like speaking for these different audiences. But man, you tell me I'm doing 7 nights at a sold out comedy club with 500 people every night, but a 2-drink minimum, and people sadly eating like mozzarella sticks, like while you're like telling a story about your dad. I don't want to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. So the download I got while you were speaking was the inner king rides the dark horse, but he is allowed to dismount at will. So if that means anything to you.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. You're gonna make me. I hate listening to podcasts I've done, and you're gonna fucking make me re-listen to this.
So something that you said earlier too that I want to bring back around because it called to me was the way you spoke about introspective work being the thing that, in a way, drew you out of your creativity, or you had to have a reprieve from creativity to focus on this other creation, which was yourself, you know, your authentic self, right? And my therapist the other day said specifically to me that when you are, I'm not considering being pregnant, but one day, you know, I'm a female, so it's possible. And she said basically that when you're pregnant for a woman, which is men have their own archetypes in creativity and creating things and bringing things to life, so to speak. And when you're pregnant, you go very much inward. So all your creative energy is creating, right? Internally in a different way than you would be introspectively. It's actually creating a physical being, this is obvious. But when we talk about humans that aren't in the middle of like giving birth to a physical being, we're giving birth to so many different things, whether it be doing the introspective work and digging out who you know, remembering all the parts that you've pushed away or lost along your journey. Right. And you're birthing literally a new you every time, right? Every time you come out of a dark night of the soul, or, you know, even just a deep meditation, you're rebirthing. And so all that creative energy that's happening it should be okay for it to suck away some of your time that you'd normally spend on creating this thing for the world.
Right. Well, and then what's really cool, by the way, this is the first time I've meditated right before doing a podcast, which is, I think, instead of why I'm like, bam, bam, dick joke, buy my album. I'm just like, I think it's because I was lonely when I was 16 is where like the trauma started. So what's cool, and I'll say this to people listening who maybe are struggling with, you know, depression, or, I mean, it's all of us, which is, after I had that phase you were just talking about, during quarantine, when I like lost everything, what was so interesting is, so I had this moment where I had this moment. Not when Robin died. I had this moment the two times I was going to kill myself. Again, comedy, baby. And where I was like, if I don't kill myself, I have to come out of this the best version of myself, or else what's the point? Like, I either give up or I have to like double down, right?
Your back's against the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what you were saying before. Totally. And so it started with just me, not even creativity. It started with just like, okay, health, blah, 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 blah. But I found that creativity, I mean, this year has been the best for me by far as like a human. But creativity, I now put on my list, even when I help people, like even just listeners who DM me, is every day it's something mindful, something physical, and something creative. Where now creativity is almost turned into part of like my self-care and part of my spiritual practice, where the days I'm like, oh, I'm gonna take off and just like chill out, I get kind of depressed. And then when I make something, and by the way, still totally detached from outcome, not LA Jamie, not, oh, this better get views on Instagram or this better, just making something and it makes me laugh, or make a video and it's one person writes me and it's like, dude, that's the video I needed today. All done. Like, I win. And what's cool is after I had that phase where I detached from comedy, detached from creativity, I realized the kind of creativity I actually wanted to be doing. That's why the stand-up album is very different. That's why I don't have the most Instagram followers, but before quarantine, I was never on Instagram. I like wasn't verified and I had like 500 followers. And all of those people, I mean, it's like almost 12,000. Not a ton, but that just happened over quarantine. And it only happened because I started making these weird little solo sketches on my phone. And they make me laugh so much more than any stand-up, especially the angry stand-up, the self-righteous shit that I used to do. These silly videos, which essentially are like different versions of like a man having a mental breakdown, and like so much of who I actually am. It's for the first time at 38 years old, I feel like, oh, this is my actual sense of humor. Even when I was yelling on stage, the stuff I laugh at is like the kind of weirder, sillier, darker stuff that I'm doing on like Instagram. And the reason that I think it hit with people is because for the first time ever, I didn't give a shit what anyone thought. I was like, I'm going to do something for me that makes me laugh. All done. And that's why the album's the way it is. That's why I refused to record the album at any of my club dates. I'm like, I want to do a weird gig in front of 30 people that sounds like 2020. That's why I started making these Instagram videos, and my Instagram did better. That's why the podcast is doing better. It's because I'm like, I want to interview this professional wrestler, and then I want to interview the guy who went to India with Ram Dass, and then I want to interview, Pete Holmes, and then I want to interview Trevor, but then I'm going to interview this porn star. But me and the porn star, we're not actually going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about spirituality. And I just don't care because I'm not surrounded by my agents anymore, or I'm doing what I want. Is it going to be more of a slow growth? Yes. Am I not killing myself? Also, yes. And so I feel like
slow growth in what?
Exactly.
Because it's extremely fast growth in a lot of other ways, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So like what I would say to people listening is when you just start doing the thing that, again, sounds so simple, doing the stuff that makes you happy, it becomes self-care. It's not self-indulgent. It becomes self-care. You end up making great art, whether it is for you, whether it is for the public. And like, man, figuring out who I am for the first time in my life it's crazy. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty beautiful. It came to mind, art is alchemy, or your art is how you alchemize your traumas and bring it basically to the gift space.
Yeah, I think Eric Gotti had said something like that recently about art.
He says also art in the animal. Like he basically says when you can figure out how to blend your animal nature and your art, you know, your gift here, you transcending.
Yeah, no, and Eric really helped me. I don't know when this is coming out, but he's one of the more recent guests. I haven't put it out yet. Where everything he talks about with your daemon or just your inner voice, just listening to it with art. It's the reason I'm moving to Austin. It's the reason that I'm making the art I'm making. It is so crazy how hard our little brains are constantly trying to like cock block our spiritual growth or our, I'm so sorry I phrased it that way, or our artistic voice, where it's like, come on, little homies, like we're all on the same side. But they're so scared. And, you know, Gazi talks about that too, about all of the little guardians you have, like protecting your traumatized inner child. And my inner child is traumatized. And, you know, learning to forgive that part of you, but also like override it.
And
Has
stay
been really,
open, just stay open
yes,
over
yes,
and
yes,
over
yes, yes,
again,
yes.
even in the face of pain and fear. And that's the hardest fucking thing in the world.
Totally.
I'm curious because you've brought up a couple of times like the spiritual side of you, the spiritual growth this year, that you want to do comedy but like to a spiritual audience.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't too long ago that you were an atheist,
Yeah.
and so I'm curious how that transition was for you, or
Yeah.
what brought that on.
Well, clearly I'm a grifter and atheism didn't work out, so I'm going into the spirituality space. Yeah, no, it's so cliche. I had a breakup and my cat died, and then I did a bunch of mushrooms. Here's where I was kind of not griftery. Here's where I was, I'm sure you guys will come up with a nicer word. Let's just say shitty. But it came from insecurity, where a lot of the things that I talked about politically or with like atheism, or was really just like matter of fact, this is the way it is. If you disagree, you're wrong. I wish it was because I was like smart enough to be a grifter, because at least then I'd have more money. But it was because like at the time I legitimately, one, thought it was right. But also because of what I was talking about before, with the high school dropout kind of insecurity about being smart, which is I was surrounded by, you know, the smartest like lefty journalists in Brooklyn. And I was kind of like the high school dropout who did dick jokes. And then when I went to be like, yeah, but what about this? They'd be like, shh, shh, shh. And that just kind of like fed into it, the insecurity even more. And so I was sort of the classic stoner 16-year-old where there was always wonderment until I became an atheist. There was always, the goofy conversations you have with your first boyfriend or girlfriend when you're looking at the stars and you're like, what's out there? Could there be a different version of us looking back at us? Or like we were soulmates. And like, I wanted all of that stuff to be true so badly. I became vegetarian at 16 because I like read and half understood a book about Taoism. I was like, we're all one. All right, cool. Like, I guess. And I always believed in something. Then, you have a tragic life and people in your family are getting hurt and doing things they shouldn't be doing and getting arrested. And those are the people that are religious. And so you're kind of like, I don't really like that. And then I sort of came to political awareness under George Bush, which it was very evangelical, very homophobic. I didn't want to be a political guy. I didn't read the newspaper. I didn't vote. But I saw what was happening to gay people. And I was like, well, that's wrong. And I was like, well, who's behind that? Republicans and the church. All right, cool. Fuck them. And that's sort of my first political stand-up was all same-sex marriage stuff around 2001-ish or whatever. And so religion automatically rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, well, I don't like that. And so I just started calling myself an agnostic. And I was the cliche, what everybody is in college, which is like, I don't like religion, but I'm spiritual, but not religious, is what you say. And then I became an atheist for, I think, the reason that most people do is you get into a relationship and your partner's an atheist and you're codependent and you don't want them to leave. And so you go, yeah, all right, fuck it, I'm an atheist. And and that's what I was. I just felt dumb. We would just have these arguments where my only argument was, yeah, but like, look, everything's so pretty, like, right? And then she would start quoting like science and shit. And I was like, well, okay. And so then I was like secretly kind of spiritually agnostic, said I was an atheist. But then what happened was all of these big atheist organizations, because I don't know if you guys know this, atheists, not the funniest people, they started reaching out to me to perform because I did this thing on TV that went like viral for its time about gay rights, and it shit on the church. And they were like, hey, do you want to do stand up at this like atheist convention? Or like, hey, you want to open for Bad Religion? Or you want to do this thing with Eddie Izzard? Or, you know, I opened for, it was me and Reggie Watts performed with Christopher Hitchens, who like wrote that book, God Is Not Great, at the Sydney Opera House. I couldn't even get booked at a shitty New York comedy club. And Reggie and I played the main stage of the Sydney Opera House with Christopher Hitchens. It's like, yeah, fucking, okay, I'm an atheist, word. And because, but again, that's the griftery part of me. Kind of though. Like I legitimately, everything I said, I believed. Everything I said about what the church did to gay people, to women, all of that was true.
What do you think it is about atheists that don't make them necessarily funny? Is it a rigidity because
yeah, I mean, what's funny is a lot of them are as rigid as religious people, as I was. I didn't want to hear. But then here's where I wanted nothing to do with the atheist community. I did and I hadn't thought about this story for a very long time, and I did Raghu Marcus's podcast, and somehow it came up because we were talking about social justice and spiritual bypass, where I did this big atheist convention thing. It was like the biggest gathering of atheists. There were like 30,000 people on the mall in Washington. And they were like, do you want to play in front of 30,000 people? And I was like, yes, please. And around the same time, there were some prominent atheists who were saying some sexist shit. And I was like, I don't like this. And there was a sect of atheists who like suspiciously would only criticize Islam, but like not the white religions, and like really, really only went off after Islam. And I was like, I don't like that either. So I wasn't going to do it. But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to write this rant, and it's going to be about atheism. It's going to be about homophobia. It's going to be whatever. And then at the end, I'm going to call out the atheists. And that's kind of what I did. And it went pretty well. It went really well. There were definitely people who didn't like me, but it went very well. Bad Religion wanted me to come back on before their set, so that was cool. They were one of my favorite bands growing up. And so I went to take this little victory lap, and when I went behind the 30,000 people, so you have like stage, 30,000 people in front. Behind, you have Washington, D.C. There was a much smaller rally with maybe like 100 people, and it was for Trayvon Martin, who was just killed. And as I was walking there, I kept seeing all these like fucking white dudes come by, and they're bitching about the Trayvon Martin rally. I go, these guys, blah, blah, blah. And I'm watching this very peaceful demonstration with people speaking about their experiences, and they're crying. And it was so powerful. And I was just like struck in place. Like I couldn't move watching it. And I was like, what am I doing? And the conclusion I came up with then, and I said this afterwards, which made a lot of atheists mad, where I was like, I would rather hang out with a Christian who wants to feed the poor than an atheist who wants to just spend all day on Reddit making fun of religious people. I remember another moment I had where I was like, yuck, was someone I followed on Twitter. When Hurricane Katrina happened, made some joke. There was some poor old black woman on the news who was like, God has a plan, God will take care of me. And just there's the smug response of like, well, God's the one who made the hurricane. And I was like, homie, get a boat and some canned goods and go do something, or shut the fuck up, is how I felt. And I was very aggressive for this very kind podcast. But like, that's how I felt. And so I was like, and with that said, there are incredible atheist organizations that do like so much good, and atheist people who don't even make a big deal out of it, who do so much good. Like you can't categorize anybody. But I was like, this ain't the tribe for me. And,
it's you know, like the energy of the community that was a problem.
Yeah.
As a whole, again.
And look, there are I just did this like these two ex-Muslims podcast the other day, and they're atheists, and like it was really funny and it was insightful, and they're liberal, and they've had people on the left mad at them and they've had people on the right mad at them. Like there are always cool people and shitty people in every community. I'm sure you find that in the spiritual community. I've seen it already in the spiritual community. What a bummer. Where you go, well, certainly everyone's going to be wonderful here because it's all about us all being one and trying to make the universe better because we're all God. And then you're just like, who's that guy? And then you get mad at yourself where you're like, I can't judge someone at the spiritual community. And then you're like, but I'm doing it. Here we are. You know, it's, and what I realized again, this whole year of sort of like figuring out who I am, where it's like, you have to make yourself, I don't want to say strong enough, but when you start becoming secure with who you are, you don't need a tribe to fill that hole, which is what I did. I needed relationships to fill that hole. I needed a tribe to fill that hole. I'm an atheist now. Okay, now I'm a spiritual person. I'm a vegan. Nope. Okay, I'm a keto person. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. Shit. No, I'm a comic. And instead of just being like, hey, I'm who I am. I'm going to walk into these different communities. I'm going to take what's great. I'm going to give everything I can. And then when I see something shady, I'm going to, bye. I'm going to go home.
Yeah, you can be a changer. We're taking that away from this episode for sure, is that you can be a changer. You can love labels because they help direct us, but you also don't have to tie yourself so strictly to them.
Yeah. Oh my God, Jade, I got political and I didn't answer your question. I did mushroom. Okay, so here's what happened. It's Valentine's Day. This is the first Valentine's Day as a guys, I don't want to get your female listeners like too turned on as a divorced 38-year-old codependent guy. And this is the first Valentine's Day I was going to be single. And, there's such a stigma about being alone. The first time I went to a movie alone, I was terrified. The first time I went to a concert alone, I was terrified. And this is all as an adult. And when I started doing things alone, I was like, this is incredible. This is magic. You know how many concerts, and I'm sure you guys have too, where you've taken a disinterested, apathetic partner and you spend the whole time kind of like looking over like, hey, baby, you okay? Do you want a snack? And like, you can't just enjoy the music.
Yeah.
I showed up so nervous to a concert. And then I literally assumed the band was going to stop. I was like, who's that sad guy in like row 22B by himself? Like the one in the tank top. And then everyone would boo and I would leave. And it was spiritual, man. It was cathartic. Like I quit drinking. I don't smoke weed. Like I was literally sober and I just felt this like energy. And I've had so many moments like that this year, sober, in nature, usually listening to music, that have almost brought me to tears, or I've left an interaction with a Starbucks cashier. I mean, mom and pop coffee place, a Starbucks cashier. There's one across. A Starbucks cashier, because I made them laugh, or they said like, or they thanked me for something nice I said, or they said something nice to me, and I would just leave with that same feeling that I could only get if like a girl gave me her phone number or something. And I was like, oh my God, you can have these like incredibly blissful moments by yourself. So Valentine's Day was coming up. I had no intention on finding God. I was just like, I'm gonna do mushrooms. Because I bought mushrooms. Me and my girlfriend were going to do mushrooms to like save the relationship. Thank God we didn't do that. And had mushrooms. I think I did mushrooms once when I was like 17. But hadn't had like an experience. I was like, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to do it on Valentine's Day. I'm going to take this damn holiday back for single people. I was like, I'm done avoiding all the like red aisles in CVS. I'm done like anytime there's like a diamond commercial, like crying and turning the TV off. I was like, I'm going to have a dope day. And so I read up about mushrooms. I put on a Ram Dass documentary, knew nothing about Ram Dass. I now have this bracelet that was given to me by Raghu that literally has like a piece of Maharaji's blanket on it that I take like everywhere with me. And like Ram Dass, legitimately, all of them have changed my life. Didn't know who he was. I was like, some like artist I like said that Ram Dass was cool. So I'm like, he'll be my like designated safe friend. So I put on a Ram Dass documentary in the background, took a bunch of mushrooms on Valentine's Day. And I don't know if this is going to come across to the listeners as just like a 16-year-old explaining his mushroom trip, but the two things that happened that were so crazy were, so I had my like intentions, I had my music. I was devastated about my cat dying. I cried about him this morning, and he died in January. Like, I think because I'm leaving here, all of these like emotions are coming back up. And there was part of me when I was scared to move to Austin. I literally was like, well, I can't go because his name was Talib Kitty, named after Talib Kweli, the rapper. I was like, because Talib died here and like his spirit might be here and like I can't leave him. And then I started crying. Like, it was a mess. It was a mess. And when he died, I got back here from the vet at like 3 a.m. I immediately went to the dumpster and like threw out all the stuff. I'm just sobbing. And what I didn't remember is I hid his blanket. I thought I threw it out, but it was in a cabinet that I do not go to. And I hired a cleaner to come vacuum. And I literally like wrote in the comments, like I was like, pet died, vacuum all pet. Like, it was so awful. And I just wanted it erased. You know, I didn't look at pictures of him till a couple weeks ago. And so I remember it kicks in. I am very much on mushrooms. And the heater was at like 82 for some reason, but I was like shivering. I was so cold. And I did, for some reason, not go to my big bed with a blanket. I went straight to that fucking closet where I hid this blanket that conscious Jamie did not remember. And I wrapped myself up in the blanket. And we used to look out the window together. And because I'm codependent, I raised a codependent cat. And so whenever I would come home, like, people were like, oh, cats are so easy. Because everyone wonder, I post so many pictures of me with strangers' dogs, and they go, why don't you get a dog? And I'm like, oh, because I might tour and I'm moving. They're like, get a cat. Cats are not. I'm like, no, you're shitty with cats then. Like, every cat I've had has been codependent because I love my cats very much. So every day I would come home, Talib would scream at me at the top of his lungs until I picked him up and held him like a baby. And then we would go to the window, and then, like he was a child, I would go, there's a house, there's a mountain, there's a car, and we would do that until he got pissed off, and then he ran away. And so I go to the window in this fucking blanket that I hid, that I forgot about, and just told him how much I loved him, and went to the window, and I just lied down, and I was like, what part of what took me there, right? And after that happened, again, intentions, find God was nowhere on my thing. But you know those moments where you're like so far gone doing something, and then you snap into it and realize what you were just doing like a couple of seconds ago? Mm-hmm. I was just looking at the mountain with my arms outstretched, saying, I am open, I am open, I am open. And then right then, during the Ramdas movie, which I completely forgot about, the bell rang, and it was just him saying, I am loving awareness, I am loving awareness. And that was it for me. I'm like, I don't know what my religion is, but I know that I'm open. I know that there's something out there. I know that we're all connected. And I know that I'm going to lead my life with loving awareness, period. And I've done it ever since. And my life, the synchronicities, the people I've met, the things that have happened, it's been nothing short of magic what has happened since then. You know, so the idea of people being like, were you lonely on Valentine's Day? I was like, lonely? I was with everyone because we're all God, son. Like, I wasn't alone at all. So yeah, that's my sad cat mushroom story.
I love that story so much. So much. I don't even have words, which is rare.
Did you see me have to trick myself by bringing up tiny dogs so that I didn't cry in the middle of the Talib story? I like split it up. I was like, here come the tears. Let's navigate out. And then we go back to the ending. Yeah, it's not a story I tell. It's not a story I tell. But it was this really beautiful moment. And look, that's what I've sort of learned with all the bad stuff that's happened to me. Because like when the breakup happened, okay, so we all read the self-help stuff. We all read the spiritual stuff that's like, pain brings you closer to God. And that's where you learn all of your lessons and blah, blah, blah. As silly as this sounds, because I know people have lost like humans in their life, and so they're like, can this guy stop talking about his cat? But like, he was my only friend here, like, period. And was like ride or die through LA, through me losing all of my money, through me coming back. It was just like me and Talib. And damn it. And so when me and the girlfriend broke up, it was a really loving breakup. It was fine. I was like, okay, I can see the good in that. Like, I'm codependent. I need to work on I've never been alone. I need to be alone for the first time. Cool. Easy. When the cat died, I was just like, fuck you, man. Like, what good comes out of it? But even with that, one, I wouldn't be going to Austin. I wouldn't be moving at all if he was still here. But two, I just started being like kinder to everyone. The reason I became friends with all these widows, that was not a joke, was because I was so sad. I would start petting everyone's dogs. And I was like, can I pet your little dog? I pet their dog. And then they'd say, you should get a dog. And then I would say, well, I lost my cat. And then they would say, well, I lost my husband. And then we would become friends because I would hold space for them and they would hold space for me, and would take little walks, or I'd watch their dog when like they needed to get surgery or whatever. And I was like, God, 5 years ago would have been too glued to my phone to even see them, or would have been wouldn't have, I don't know, talked about Talib to a stranger. And so even that shitty thing where it's just like, oh man, it's just like a little sweet animal who died. Like, there's still stuff you can get out of it to make you better or kinder or like give more, so yeah, that's what I'm taking out of that.
You can find the silver lining. I noticed that in this small hour we've been on here, you brought up death in so many different ways, and it's something that we're all attracted to because it's so it's elusive, but also it's the inevitable. So it's this very interesting thing. But also made me think about, and maybe this is valuable for you, maybe it's not, but just the idea of death being the final freedom, especially for masculine, for the masculine energy, like seeking that unburdening. And I don't know if that sits with you. Yeah. What does that mean?
I've never really been afraid of death. The thing, one of the good things about having been suicidal is when you hear people like be afraid of death, you're kind of like, oh, I was like that was my goal at one point. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't really scare me. But for me, it's always been death of these. What I've really been focusing on this year is death of these like preconceptions of who I was that completely held me back, whether it's shame, whether it's lack of confidence, whether it's, filling the God-shaped hole, as they say, with relationships or with drinking or with overeating. I mean, shit. Yeah, that's another thing, ladies. I'm pretty sure I'm a male with an eating disorder, which doesn't get talked about a lot. But like all of these things that I was trying to fill this hole with, those are kind of like the little deaths I'm looking to shed. Regular death, although, it's crazy that you brought that up. I've literally never been afraid of death, but I was meditating before this podcast and I had this like glimpse of being afraid of it, because I'm like, oh, I'm finally living the life that I kind of want to live, or I'm like on my way there. And it was just this passing thought of like, what a fucking bummer that would be if you died. But it wasn't like crazy. But I definitely thought about it a little bit. I mean, I haven't the closest. It's a very weird world. I have both parents, all my siblings, the people I have lost. The only death I've experienced is my fucking best friend, Kat, and fucking Robin Williams. So like, they're very like weird examples, I mean, I remember when Robin died being so confused when I saw Obama talking about him like 2 days later, where I was like, why is the president talking about my friend? Like, it was just all sorts of weird. So I've had death just come to me in like different ways. Again, guys, 25% capacity. The funniest album you hear all year.
It is fascinating though that it becomes a that suicide seems to be one of those things that goes with comedy sometimes, and that
I know.
there's and at the same time it's not a surprise if you really dig into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Comedy for me, this is why I got into comedy. And again, I said this in like a joke video on Instagram this morning, but it's 100% true, which is interviewers would always go, hey, so you were the class clown, right? And I'm like, you're out of your mind. The class clown beat the shit out of me, called me horrible names, and I like cried or sat in the corner. The comedy for me was a defense mechanism. Comedy for me, my first memories of comedy helping me were like, oh, I remember the first time I saw comic relief. It was, no, I remember when my mom was being taken away by the police or the ambulance, and me and my brothers were upstairs, and we were all panicked and we were crying. And once someone made a joke, and it was always an offensive joke because it was about a terrible thing that's happening, we would all start laughing. It would feel so cathartic. And then once that hit and the ice was broken, now you can figure out what to do. Now you can brainstorm. Now you can problem solve. I actually think that's why I was attracted to talking about controversial issues on stage, because I'm like, well, if I can get us to laugh about it, then I can, maybe we can talk about it. Maybe we can come up with solutions. So yeah, I mean, to me, and I think to a lot of comics, comedy, we weren't the class clowns. The class clowns were assholes. They were the ones who were mean. They were yelling at the teachers. They were making like, a lot of times the comics were the weird introverts in the back. And suddenly we had this like superpower, you know, like, well, we can't fight the jocks, but like we can be funny about it. We can write about it. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of sadness. There's a ton of insecurity with comedy. Robin was so crazy for so many people because he seemed like he was just, I mean, he was just the most joyous, invincible person. So it just like rocked everybody. And what I try to say, I say it on my podcast a lot. I say it on any big podcast I go on, or I try to, which is every time I do a podcast, guys, my DMs not filled with ladies sliding in. They're literally filled with like dudes who are like, hey man, I was gonna kill myself until I heard your podcast. Or someone was like, hey man, I heard your podcast. Are you gonna kill yourself? And like, that's pretty much my direct messages. And so I think this is really important to talk about. The people that I've talked to, or Robin, who have thought about killing themselves or who have killed themselves, are the most fucking flawed, like we all are, for the most part, wonderful, kind, compassionate, empathetic. They're people who feel deeply in a world where we need to feel more deeply, where we're screaming at each other online, where we're drawing these fucking lines, where we're being so divisive. And a lot of times the ones who feel the depression, they're just more open and honest about it than a lot of people are, or they see the tragedies and it hurts them so much, and the pain feels so much bigger than them. And what I would literally beg of you guys is that if you're feeling that way, know that like, we need you more than ever. You know, the dude who's being racist on Twitter, that guy's not thinking about killing himself. He's gonna be around forever. He's probably going to cryotherapy now to like live to 90. The sweet, kind, weird, artistic people who feel like they don't fit in. It's like, you don't understand. The people who feel like they don't fit in, they have no idea how much the majority of other people actually look up to them. They feel so weird. They feel so left out. They feel, you know, but a lot of people look at them and they go, wow, that guy's really brave. Or that girl's so brave. Like, she can just be her fucking self. Like, I wish I could do that, right? I wish I wasn't at this job I fucking hate. I wish I could be in that band. I wish I had the balls to get that tattoo or that piercing, or, you know, start that podcast or talk openly about sex, or, you know, whatever it is. But a lot of times those are the kind of people who, it's like you get this beautiful creativity and weirdness that makes you stand out in the most spectacular way. But then the other side to that is you also get some depression and anxiety, and you feel like you don't fit in and you feel ostracized. But yeah, just the big thing I really would like to say is like, my God, do we need more and more and more people like that? And so don't go anywhere, man.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So there's a few questions we like to ask everyone who comes on the show. First off, with all that we've talked about here, I have a feeling this will be an interesting answer here.
Oh boy. I refuse. Yeah. Okay.
If you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
I'm gonna start crying. You know what sucks? The first thing that came to my head was "I'm sorry," which I hate, and I don't know why. I mean, I guess I know why. So that's not gonna be my answer. There's no way that's gonna be my answer. I mean, I think I would say.
Why won't you let that be your answer?
It just feels mean, you know? And like it's so interesting where I talk such a big game on the podcast about your flaws make you who you are, and about constantly becoming better, and about all this stuff. And then that's kind of like selling that out, right? Because it's like, I'm sorry for what? Like essentially what I would be apologizing for is like, hey man, you're gonna go through a lot of shit. But that also like that brought me to here. And that brought me, and I want to be here. I want to be talking to you two right now.
Can I just pose in the middle of that? If you were talking to a friend and not yourself, saying sorry would be the start of that conversation. It would be necessary to even open the door to that conversation.
Fucking God, I love you too. Okay, so ready? Here it is. It's, I'm sorry. Things are going to be really hard. But as long as you are kind, as long as you keep learning, as long as you keep being fucking weird, and then I'll say, don't say that word to your parents. You'll get in trouble. You're very young. And as long as you can be you and make things that make other people happy, everything is going to be okay. And then I would hug him so tightly.
How old are you?
How old am I right now?
Or how old are you in the vision of hugging yourself?
God, I'm so bad with ages.
Just a general, it's fine.
No. So like, I pictured myself. Do you know I had blonde hair and used to be tan? Do you know I'm Hawaiian? I don't know what the fuck happened. I think like 4-ish is the age I was picturing.
So young.
Yeah.
If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Ooh. Calvin and Hobbes. Any of them.
Calvin Hobbes?
Any of the Calvin Hobbes. I have a big Calvin Hobbes tattoo on my calf. And before I got that tattoo, I was like, I should reread Calvin and Hobbes and make sure it's not some weird like religious-y cult and like I missed like any like racist undertones. And it is literally all about imagination, questioning authority, friendship. The last panel. So Bill Watterson, who wrote it, he kind of became like the not Holden Caulfield, J.D. Salinger, of like cartoon strips, where they offered him so much money to keep writing Calvin and Hobbes and to make like the rights of Hobbes, so you could sell little tigers, and $1 bazillion would have made. And he flat out refused. And the last panel of Calvin and Hobbes is, and I think of Me and to Live, is he's saying something, Calvin, they're about to walk into the woods or something, and Calvin goes like, let's go on an adventure, old buddy. And like that sums up that for me. So yeah, any and all Calvin and Hobbes.
Love it. If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
I love you. It's easy.
That's good. Before we let you go, where can people find you online?
Great. So for my ego, know that I have more followers on Instagram or on Twitter. Don't follow me there. It's a toxic cesspool, and you should probably all cancel your accounts. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm actually being myself for the first time, which is at the Jamie Kilstein. And then I make comedy videos. I talk about mental health. I try to help as many people as I can in those DMs. If it's on Instagram, that means I'm probably pretty proud of it. And then my podcast is called A Fuck Up's Guide to Self-Help, which you probably pieced it all together. I don't need to explain what that's about. And so, if you are a fighter listening to this, I have a fight podcast too called Rear Naked Radio. And then, the new album's kind of the biggest thing that I'm trying to promote. Guys, get this album to #1 so I can quit comedy and just be a professional wrestler, please. That's all I want. That's all I want. I just want to make funny stuff.
I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been great. And I didn't know where we were going to end up, but I'm so glad we touched on all the things we did. I think we even left stuff off the table. We do definitely at a later time, we're going to come back and discuss male eating disorders. I think that is something that really needs to be talked about.
This is great. It's a perfect two-parter. This was like my more like feminine, open, vulnerable episode, and then the second one will be the masculine, where we talk about jiu-jitsu, but we talk about the eating disorder and like what the like masculinity should be. It's perfect. I set it up for a cliffhanger. It's great, guys. I gotta say, this is I wanted myself to shut up so bad, because every time either of you talked, I was so. What you do is very important, and I'm very glad I got to know you guys. Is the succinct way to say it.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.